This story is about White Mountain and what happened in White Mountain. In the process of time, I was dropped off at White Mountain, not knowing anybody, and I decided to take my guitar and begin to walk the village. I met a man and his son because I was knocking on the doors of every house, and I met this man and his son. His son had the radio turned up really, really loud with rock music, and I was trying to talk to his father. His father suggested that we go outside. We went outside, although it was about 30 below outside. But I realized that God was in this, that I was to talk to this man. And as we gathered behind his house out of the wind, that I began to tell him about a Jesus that loved him very much. And quickly he began to tear up. And he gave his heart and his life to the Lord that day. And it was an awesome thing. God was going to start something that I didn't realize would continue for a number of years. It wasn't long, then I was headed back to Nome. Nome was my place. That was my mission station. I remember that as I walked toward the airplane, that all of a sudden I noticed that there was a family that was there, that was waiting right outside the house where I'd slept on the couch. And as I walked to the airport, which the runway, it was just a runway, there was no airport, but it was a runway up there. As I walked to that, I says to the young man and his wife, and it looks like they had 2 kids, I said, "Oh, you going to Nome?" "Oh, no, Pastor." And I said, "Oh, okay," because I learned you don't pry too much into people's lives. So it wasn't long, then there was another family that caught up with us. And I said, "Hey, you going to Nome?" "Oh, no, I'm not going to Nome." So finally we got up there and a 207 pulled up, and my place to ride that little flight back to Nome was all the way in the rear of that airplane, that 207. I put a little suitcase, I put my guitar in with me, and I strapped in. And about that time, as I got ready to shut the door, I felt someone reaching out to my elbow. And he grabbed my elbow and he looked at me, and it was one of the men that had walked up. And he said, "Pastor, we have no pastor here. Would you come back and preach to us?" And when he said that, the tears were coming down his cheeks. And it made me suddenly realize that there were a lot of hungry people in Alaska that had no pastor. I looked up, and the other man and his wife, they were both crying. They said, "Pastor, would you come and preach to us? We need you so much." I went back to Alaska that day with heavy hearts. And that was a burden that seemed to stay with me, and out of that become Because We Care. And I was able to send all those tapes out to the village. But let's go back to the man that was saved. The man that got saved every now and then would come into Nome, and he would look me up, and we would go through Bible study together. One day I found out that he had a son in our church that didn't even know who his father was. When I found this out, I asked the dad, I said, "Is it all right if I tell your son who you are?" And he said, "It's okay." So that Sunday night, when we all come back to church, there was a young man that had been sleeping in my house many, many times. And since then, he's been called to be a pastor. He's went through college, and now he wants to learn to be a professor. He wants to go into higher education. And he's a great young man. But when I called him on the phone, I said, "You need to come over to church early. I've got a surprise for you." And he said, "I'll be right there." When he came in the door, I said, I've got a great surprise for you. The surprise is your daddy is in the top of our church. Would you like to meet your dad? Tears began to flow through that young man's eyes and come down. He said, I've wanted to know my dad for so many years. I said, go up there. He's sitting at the table drinking a cup of coffee. He's the only one up there. That's your father. I was able to introduce him that day. Since then, he's become a very special young man to me. Not only that, that father has also become a very special person in my life. And that's just one of the stories that can happen in Alaska, in the bush.